Modern Family. What happens where you almost blow it? And then take me to that call you get on the drive home from your manager.
My friend Matt Corboy, he has a role, an audition for a role in a pilot called My American Family, and he asked me for my help. He was auditioning for the role of Cameron on My American Family, so he comes over and I'm like walking through this material with him, and at the end of it I said, Matt, I gotta be honest with you, I'm gonna do everything I can to go in and get an audition for this part, because I didn't have an audition for it. He's like, you totally should. And so Steve had some resistance from the beginning of getting me in for the audition, and we had to kind of go above and beyond.
And what's above and beyond? That was the
I had meetings with network people before on other projects that knew me just as a person. And so Steve manager made those calls and said, hey, can you get Stonestreet in on this? Just get him seen. So then they call the casting director and say, hey, see Eric Stonestreet. So I went in and Jeff was like, you know, you're very good. And I went in right for Steve and Chris and made them laugh. And that was it. Called and said, hey, it's not gonna go any further. And Steve and Chris, they hate hearing this because that's not, their experience isn't that. They're seeing hundreds of people for that. So my experience is very personal because I was amped up for this part. I thought I could crush it. Their experience is like, probably not what we really want. Well, 2 weeks pass and we get the call and they say, hey, they're still thinking about your take on Cam. They want to see you again. I'm like, they said, but they want you clean shaven and they want you to dress more appropriately for the part. And so I went to Macy's. I told the lady there, I said, hey, I got this audition for this guy. He's in a relationship with another man and he's the more paternal of the two and I need to wear something a little, you know, lighter. And so I got a lavender gingham shirt, navy pants, and a gray cardigan. And I said, if I get this part, I'm gonna come back and thank you. And so that's what I wore in, and clean shaven, did the audition, and again, they said no, not going any further. Again, Steve and Chris. I was mad now because I had spent money. I did exactly what I didn't want to do, which is I jumped through hoops, and that didn't get me any success either.
How did that anger come out in you?
You know, it's not like I'm punching walls or anything like that. It's just like, just angry, like pissed. I was mad because I thought I was perfect for the part. I saw them laughing. I heard them laughing. I see it. I know it. And then 2 weeks more passed, and I had an audition at 20th Century Fox during that period, and I had to look down there and see all these people going in for what I thought should have been my role. It was like, oh, and I recognized people and I knew what they were reading for. Ooh, see, this is the anxiety. This is where it just feels like so overwhelming looking back on it. But it turned out good in this case.
Even now?
Oh God, I feel it. And then they call and say, okay, we want to test Eric at studio. We want to bring him in. So it went from, you're not getting this part twice to you might get this part. Well, here we go again. So I go in, I do it, and they call and say, okay, you're gonna go to network tomorrow. So I passed the studio test. Now it's another level because what's growing is my expectation and the number of people I'm performing for. So you go into Dana Walden's office at 20th, and there might be 8 people in there, plus Steve and Chris, plus casting and casting associate.
And she's as big as it gets. She might be running Disney after Iger, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. So I left there. They call and say, you're going to test tomorrow with Jess. I'd read with Jesse for the studio test, and now for the network test, I'm going to ABC, which is 12 minutes from my house. So I go in, and sure enough, it's just like this mini theater. I did my classic line, which I would say when I knew I wasn't in front of the same people, which is like, I've done theater for less people than this. Laugh, ha ha ha. And then did the scene. And Jesse tells a story on this line that I had done in the audition that I always got a laugh on. I didn't get a laugh at network. And then he said, then you pulled out a Z-snap. And I'd never done a Z-snap before. And Jesse was like, oh no, he's pushing. You know, and I felt it too. I'm like, what? Where did that come from? I didn't mean to do that. And then I left, and Jason Weiner had been hired as as the director of the pilot at that point. Steve McPherson was the head of ABC. And can only trust that it's true. There was debate on whether I was right for the part, which is what my suspicion was the whole time. It's like, well, is he physically right? And Jason Weiner told me that the then president of Steve McPherson stood up and said exactly what I had been thinking the whole time. And he said, funny is funny, hire the mother. And I got the part. And so I drive home, it's raining, and Steve, my manager, calls in at that point. He says, hey, Eric, I just want to tell you that you've been doing this a long time. And I know this is important. This role is important to you, and this show is important to you. And there's just no doubt that there's good days and there's bad days, buddy. And this just happens to be a good day. And I was like, well, what? Hold on, what? He goes, you got the part, bro. You got it. And the next day I had a friend coming in town from K-State Theater. He was the set designer at K-State. And he was just coming in town by chance. And I told him, I'm like, I got this part. I think it's big. And then Levitan and Lloyd said, hey,
the creators of the
creators
show,
said, hey, do you want to come see the pilot? And I said, sure. I hadn't seen it, so we go over to 20th Century Fox. It's like these two pivotal moments. We walk in and we watch the pilot and we walk out, and I'll never forget him looking at me going, you're going to be famous. Like you're going to be famous. That's going to be a huge TV show. I was like, you never know, all my years of not getting too excited and trying to stay even keeled, I'm like, we don't know. And then Ed O'Neill called me and tells me it's going to be a hit. He said, Eric, that show's not on for 10 years. I don't know what the I'm doing in this business. And that's when I believe, like, okay, maybe it's going to be real. Maybe it will.
And I think your longest job up to that point was something like 8 days. And it's one thing to get the role. It's a whole nother thing to then find out the back 9 episodes.
So that was the key. When they picked up the back 9 is when then you could start to see like a second season, a third season, a fourth season, and then it starts to become like, oh, this is like all those TV shows I've grown up watching. I'm gonna be on for a while. People are gonna know my name.